It's like the kid in class that's obviously lagging behind everyone else too.
Mhm.
It's like, especially over the last 6 months, I think it's become like more and more apparent, like, oh, this kid's going to flunk out. Siri's really struggling. Something wrong is at home, I think, or.
Well, I'm just glad they're integrating it into the new operating system. But hey, welcome back to the Avocado Toast, another episode. We're sitting here with Matt Bourhis from Golden Gate Legal and Bourhis Law Group. Bourhis, right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's confusing. It's got a lot of vowels. It's a French name.
Is it French?
It's technically Bourhis.
What's Bourhis?
Bourhis is the French pronunciation of my last name, but we
really?
butchered that when my family came to the U.S.
Oh, I didn't know you were French.
Oh yeah, dual citizenship, baby.
You really?
Uh-huh.
So you have an EU citizenship?
Yeah, I've got the French passport, mustache, and everything.
Okay.
They just wouldn't let me, have a cigarette out of my mouth when I took my passport photo.
You should get a beret.
I should.
All right. So again, welcome to another episode of the Avocado Toast. We talk to lawyers here, and we talk about their practice, the way they help people, and how they got here. So I'm Peng from R23 Law Group, and Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about your law firm?
Well, I technically have two law firms, oddly enough, but the one that I inherited from my dad was Bourhis Law Group. That's what he built over his 45, 50-year-long career.
Mm-hmm.
And that one specializes in disability insurance, bad faith. And then when I graduated from law school and passed the bar, I went to go practice with him, and then I took over the firm. And then our friend Ritza, who we went to law school with,
Mm-hmm.
came to practice law with me, and she expressed some interest in doing personal injury. And I was like, okay, well, how do I do this with this like very niche, narrow firm with this like really strong reputation in disability insurance, bad faith? And I don't want it to become like sort of a jack of all trades and rebrand it in PI. So we decided, okay, we'll open up a second law firm, Golden Gate Legal, and that's the PI firm.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you guys are one of the premier insurance bad faith firms in the state of California.
This is true.
All right. And that makes sense. So are there challenges, or do you, in operating two separate law firms, because most law firms just separate out the practice, right? Or do you find it actually to be beneficial to have a separation?
It's a different model. I mean, you're right. Most law firms just have different practice areas or different like departments basically within the same brand.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided that because the brand of Bourhis Law Group was so well established,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to dilute that by adding a new practice area. Like, one of the reasons why we're able to attract like such great clients and such good cases is because it's so specialized.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, it really makes more sense to just have a PI practice branded as its own thing. Plus, it gives Ritza the opportunity to really have some more ownership over the firm and build something from the ground up herself. And both of us are building it together. And I think that was a good choice.
I love it. I love it. You can tell whenever you're talking to a young lawyer because they use words like branding.
Yeah, it's all about the brand. You never hear the real brands talking about their brands. You hear the ones that like aspire to have a brand.
Yeah.
Talking about the importance of branding.
Yeah. Coca-Cola doesn't talk about branding a lot, but Jake Paul does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned a little bit about your background and how you got started with the firms, and now what? Okay, actually, let's take it back a second. How
You don't mind if I drink
please
on this
go.
podcast, do you?
Oh, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sponsored?
I wish.
Oh,
I mean, please sponsor us if you could.
do it.
Yeah. Especially Aperol. Aperol, if you're looking to sponsor people, we're very interested here.
I mean, it is a lawyer podcast. You got to go for like the liquor brands.
It's true.
It's like the lifeblood of lawyers.
It's true. Yeah. So, how long have you guys been operating the PI practice of Golden Gate?
Golden Gate has been in business now for 1.5, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a young one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how's the progression been?
Rapid.
Yeah.
It's crazy because when we started the firm, the big challenge was, okay, how do you generate clients? Like, you have no reputation, you have no brand,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're competing against all of these huge personal injury firms that have big billboards all over the freeways and, like $1 million a month marketing budgets. It's like,
Really?
oh yeah. Like these guys like Sweet James and Jacoby Myers and like all those guys, like they spend tons and tons of money just on marketing.
Really?
Yeah, it's insane.
$1 million a month?
Probably more than that, to be honest. I mean, like any one of those like big billboards that you see out there is like 6 figures a month.
6 figures?
Yeah, it's crazy. We looked into it when we were starting. We were like so naive. We're like, oh, why don't we get one of these, billboards? And it's like, well, maybe in like 20 years, it's just not an option.
Wow. I mean, that makes sense. I guess I've never thought about it. So as you know, my background, I've been working in larger firms, and the coming through law school, and you see these billboard lawyers, and there's an image of what they do, and then the lawyers you see on TV, and then the government lawyers. It's like every single type of lawyer has their own image, and the billboards, I just never associated high investment with them. Like, why do you think that is?
God, it's just like a volume game for them. It's a totally different business model because their whole business model is just get all the clients that you possibly can. Good ones, bad ones, everything else in between. And they refer most of them out to like the firms that are actually litigating the cases and practicing law and getting results. And so they get a kickback with a referral fee. So these big billboard firms, they often don't really need to do very much work themselves. Like their overhead for like hiring lawyers and litigating cases and everything else is relatively low. Their budget is just all in generating clients, and they just farm out most of them to other firms that do all the work, and then they get a check in the mail.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What how does it work for the clients? Like, let's say I get in a car accident, God forbid, and I call one of these. I call Sweet James, right? And so I'm not getting Sweet James to help me.
If you had like a really good case, you would probably get Sweet James. They'll take the cream of the crop. That's their whole thing. It's like they've got 10,000 potential clients to pick from. They'll pick the 10 really good ones for themselves, litigate them with a limited budget and like relatively limited means, relative to the number of cases that they're getting. And then the other 9,990 cases that they've got, they'll farm out to other firms.
Well, and what do you mean by a good case? What's a good case?
Yeah. So, number one, it's like the catastrophic injury cases.
I see that term being used.
Yeah, like lost limb, big traumatic brain injury, paralyzed, lost eye. Those are the kinds of cases that are just worth a ton of money. And then also a defendant that's got money to pay. Because, okay, let's say that you've got a car accident where somebody lost both their legs, but there's an insurance policy with $15,000 limits, and the person that caused the accident, lives in a trailer and has no money. It's like, what are you going to do? You've got all these damages. I mean, the case in theory is worth millions and millions of dollars. Where are you going to get it from? I mean, nobody's going to pay it.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are considerations that goes into what is a good case. All right. So let's do this. How does a personal injury case work? From the moment that one of your potential clients, and please give us a real story if you have one. I'm sure you do. How does a personal injury case work? From the moment a person is injured to the moment that they receive their compensation. How does this work?
Every case is different, but let's just take like your garden variety personal injury case, like an auto accident. So somebody's in an accident. They've got some injuries, let's say like a broken arm or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're doing all the stuff at the scene of the accident that you would expect them to do, taking photos, taking videos, exchanging information with the other driver. So they've got their name, their contact info, their insurance info. Usually they actually file the claim too. And
what do you mean by file claim?
They call the insurance company and they say, hey, this accident happened. It was your insured's fault. I wasn't at fault. I've got this broken arm. And the insurance company says, okay, well, we're going to investigate it. And, maybe we'll pay you. We'll figure out how much we're going to pay you, if anything. And
like their own insurance company pays them?
Well, both. So you start with the at fault driver. So let's say that like you're driving down the street, doing nothing wrong, following all the traffic rules. You're going through an intersection and then you just get T-boned by a drunk driver. Okay. So the drunk driver is the at fault driver. So it's their insurance company that's liable to pay you for your injuries.
And that's why everybody must have insurance before they drive.
Exactly. Yeah. California requires everyone to carry insurance for that reason.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And you filed a claim. And at what point does the injured call you?
Usually when the insurance company is jerking them around.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when they're struggling, they don't know what to do next.
Yeah. Because they're like, well, I've got this broken arm. I've got, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses, which are, getting more expensive by the day. My doctors tell me that I'm going to need surgery at some point in the future. I've been out of work. I've got all these lost wages, or I lost my job, or, I've got all this pain, that seemingly is going to last the rest of my life. And the insurance company is pushing me to sign this waiver and release and accept a $6,000 payment. That doesn't seem fair to me. I feel like I should contact a lawyer and make sure I'm getting the most amount of money possible. So then they pick up the phone, they call us, and we.
Did you say $6,000 and they've been?
Oh yeah, insurance companies will always lowball you. That's what they do. It's like right after the accident, they're just pushing you to sign a release and accept some small payment. And sometimes it seems like a lot. It's like, oh wow, $6,000 for like getting hit by a car. Like, sounds good to me. People have no idea how much money they actually could get. It's like that's the whole game that lawyers and insurance companies, play. It's the whole dance.
Yeah, probably shouldn't trust insurance companies.
Never.
Whatever they say.
No.
All right. And what do you do? What do you do for your clients?
Well, usually for the first few weeks, it's just information gathering. So you have to have the client send you everything that they have, the photos, the videos, the police report, their medical records. You get all the information and understand exactly what's going on in the case. And then the client's job is done. They don't engage in any further communication with the insurance company. All they have to do is continue getting regular medical treatment. And then as the lawyer, I'm going out and talking to the insurance company and trying to figure out, okay, how much are the policy limits, which sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't. The law doesn't require them to tell you the policy limits anyway, but there's a limit on the amount of coverage that the insurance company, is liable for. So let's say that it's like $100,000. Okay. You try to find out what that is. And then basically the lawyers work up the case to sort of explain, okay, here's how much money my client deserves because of this accident. Here's how much they deserve because of the medical expenses. Here's how much they deserve because of the future medical expenses. Here's how much they deserve for their lost wages. Here's how much they deserve for their pain and suffering, which is often a speculative question, but you have to put a dollar figure on it somehow. And then you say, the amount of all of their damages exceeds the policy limits. It's at least $100,000, probably more than that. And so you gather up all this information, you send it to the insurance company in this, cohesive demand letter, and you say, okay, we need you to pay us within 30 days. The insurance company and their bean counters, figure out what they want to do with it, and they'll either pay you or they'll try to negotiate with you, and you ultimately will reach some sort of a settlement. It's like a pre-litigation settlement. That's the way most of these PI cases pan out. And then they write you a check and you give it to your client, and that's it.
Oh, wow. Okay. That makes sense. Now, when you say these are pre-litigation settlements, that means you're not in court doing this?
Yeah. So like, where's the law practice, right? Yeah. So, let's say that the insurance company is, going to stiff you.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it happens with the bigger policies. The smaller ones, they'll just pay out.
Mm.
But the bigger ones, if it's like a $500,000 policy or $1 million policy, that's when they're like, we don't really want to pay the whole thing. Maybe we could find a way to underpay them.
Mm.
And if they're really going to play hardball with you and only offer you cents on the dollar, then you have to sue them.
Mm.
And that's when you get into court.
I see. Now, what is the how much does all this cost the client?
No, nothing. It's like the sweetest deal in the world.
What do you mean nothing?
Well, because these PI lawyers, we work on a contingency fee basis. So it's like you typically see this on the billboards. It's like, you don't pay unless we win. It's gimmicky, but it's really true. So the idea is that, the client doesn't have to pay the lawyer anything. They don't charge by the hour. They don't charge a retainer. I mean, some do, but they shouldn't. Mm-hmm. The lawyer will advance all of the costs and expenses in the case. Mm-hmm. And basically, whatever the lawyer gets out of the insurance company at the end of the day, they split with the client. Like, 40% for the lawyer, 60% for the client, something like that.
I see. Well, that makes sense, because then the lawyer you are incentivized to get as big of a settlement as possible.
Yep.
Because you make more, the client makes more. Mm-hmm. Or if you get more if the client gets more.
Rising tide raises all ships.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, that explains why this is such a big practice area. Now, what are the types of cases that you see the most in your practice? Car accidents?
Car accidents are the most common. Slip and falls are common too, like dangerous premise cases. Somebody spilled milk in the grocery store, they didn't clean it up, and one of the customers slipped and fell and broke their hip.
Okay. And who do you file a claim against in that situation?
The store. Yeah.
I see. Okay. So, Matt, tell me about the most memorable opportunity you had to help one of your clients.
I mean, in recent memory, it's got to be Constantino. This is a guy, I recently won a jury trial for him in Boston.
Really?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Congrats.
Thank you.
What happened?
This is one of my disability insurance bad faith cases. Mm-hmm. And I worked on this damn case for like 6 years. It's like a pre-pandemic case. Mm-hmm. And so once the pandemic happened, everything got log jammed in the courts, as you know. Mm-hmm. And so this thing just got dragged on and on and on. This poor guy, he's an incredible dude. He was like president of a hospital in New York, just like top-notch physician, mm-hmm. nicest person you've ever met in your life. Does all this charity work, created these like foundations to help underprivileged youth in Rochester, graduate from high school and get good paying jobs, and just incredible.
So what happened to him? Tell us about it.
So what happened is, back in the 80s, he bought this disability insurance policy from Paul Revere, which is an insurance company that's owned by Unum, like one of the biggest insurers in the country.
Okay.
And so
sounds like a very Boston company, Paul Revere.
Yeah, exactly. In Boston.
Yeah.
But he lives in New York, my client.
Uh-huh.
And so he buys this policy in the 80s, like most doctors do, fresh out of medical school. He's paying thousands and thousands of dollars for it every year. And it's like sterling policy, disability coverage. The whole idea is, okay, you have this specialized skill set that you invested all this time and money into getting, to be a doctor. What if you become disabled and you can't practice medicine anymore? The insurance will pay you benefits. It'll pay you every month so that you don't need to worry about your lost income. Okay. That's the gist of the policy.
Okay.
So he's paying for this for years. And then in the late 90s, he got cancer. He got colon cancer. He had to get surgery and chemotherapy. He's also a diabetic. Mm-hmm. And so chemotherapy and diabetes, mixed like oil and water. It's just bad. Causes all this nerve damage in your extremities, peripheral neuropathy, like really bad stuff. And so his hands and his feet start experiencing all this muscle wasting and nerve damage. I mean, his nerves are literally dying, and he's becoming paralyzed. So this is happening, progressively over several years. And then fast forward like 10 years after he first gets cancer, now he's got a nasty case of lumbar spinal stenosis, which is a condition where your spinal cord basically starts narrowing and strangles your nerves, causing more nerve damage. So he's got all these things going against him, and his legs and feet just become like totally useless, like flaps of meat basically. And he's dragging them around and falling all over the place while he's continuing to work in the hospital. And
he's still working?
Yeah, he's still working.
Wow.
He's just that kind of guy, crazy.
Okay.
So then he finally gets this surgery, this like spine surgery, major operation, and he's just toast at that point. No sensation in his feet anymore, absolutely none. He has to wear these like prosthetic braces and get around in a wheelchair and like canes and like holding onto walls and furniture and stuff like that. And he just can't perform rounds in the hospital anymore. So he moves into this office practice, this like sedentary occupation where he's now just sitting in a chair in an office, not rounding in the hospital anymore. And his income goes down by like 70%. He's like a shell of his former self, and he files this disability insurance claim. And they're like, oh, you're only partially disabled. So we're going to pay you like a fraction of your benefits. He's like, okay. So for a few years, they're paying him a fraction of his benefits and going through this tedious exercise of exchanging financial information and his profit and loss statements and his tax returns and all this bullshit. And after a couple of years of that, he gets this letter in the mail from the insurance company, and they're like, you actually owe us money.
What?
Like $20,000. And he's like, wait a sec, what the hell? Like, I've spent thousands of dollars for my entire career just to have this incredible insurance policy, and now I'm like severely disabled. I've lost a massive amount of money. Like, I'm making personal loans to my business just to keep it afloat, basically hiring a bunch of nurses and other people to like operate the business while I sit in a chair. He's like, how could this possibly be my insurance coverage where like now I owe the insurance company money? This is ridiculous. And so he asks for a copy of his policy, and the claim rep gives it to him, and he reads it, and he discovers that there's a provision in there that says you are presumptively totally disabled, notwithstanding your ability to work. It specifically says like you can continue working and you are entitled to total disability benefits if you've totally lost the use of both your feet. And he says, well, that's me. Obviously, it has been for many years. The insurance company has known about this. Why haven't you guys paid my claim under this presumptive total disability thing? And they go, oh, because you never told us that you wanted to file under this provision. He's like, what? It's like, I'm trusting you guys to like adjust the claim. You're the insurance company. I'm not an insurance adjuster. I'm a doctor. Like, can I file under this now? And they're like, oh yeah, we'll consider it. Yeah, we'll consider it. You just have to send us all this paperwork. So he sends them 3 letters, one from his neurosurgeon, one from his neurologist, one from his podiatrist surgeon, and all of them are like, he's totally disabled. He has no sensation in his feet. We have objective medical evidence of this, like nerve conduction studies that shows there's no electrical sensation in his feet. The neurosurgeon is literally saying, I performed spine surgery on him. Like, my hands have been in his spine. I know what I'm talking about. And the guy has no sensation in his feet. They're functionally useless. His podiatrist is even telling the insurance company, I have amputated several of his toes because he's developing all these infections because he can't feel his feet. And he gets all these sores on his feet. He doesn't notice. They develop into these infections. He'll get sepsis if it's untreated. And so I'm literally amputating his toes without anesthesia because he can't feel it.
Okay.
So he sends all this to the insurance company. They denied his claim.
They denied his claim.
They denied it. Yeah. And so, long story short, this begins this multi-year long battle that he has with the insurance company where he is imploring them to approve this claim. He's like, what are we missing here? This is totally obvious. I have 3 treating physicians telling you that I'm presumptively totally disabled. Not to mention the fact, like, I myself am a doctor. I was the president of a hospital. Like, I practice internal medicine, board certified. Like, I know what I'm talking about when I'm describing like my own medical condition to you.
Yeah, he knows he can't walk. In medical school, he learned enough to know he can't walk.
Totally. And so he's trying to explain this to the insurance company. And he's like, how could you do this? Like, send me a copy of the physician's report that you're relying on to deny this claim. And of course, they didn't have one. They just had it reviewed by like some nurse that they paid to like render a medical opinion that says he's not disabled. And basically, they're just delaying for all these years. And the guy had to refinance his house. He had to like pour money into like keeping his practice alive because the insurance company stopped paying him. He had to sell his life insurance policy while he's dealing with all these major mortality issues because of his health. And then we finally sue them. And he calls me, we sue them right away.
Wait, when did you come in?
Yeah, he tried fighting them for years on his own. And then after 5 attempts, literally 5 denials from the insurance company, he's totally fed up with it. He's like, I've never hired a lawyer in my entire life. I've never sued anybody in my entire life. And he calls me and I was like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but like, this is the only option. You have to sue them. Sometimes you just got to hold their feet to the fire, no pun intended, but
make them feel it because their little feet works.
Yeah. So we did. But then the whole process gets delayed because of COVID. And so here I am like, okay, I'm trying to do my job of, getting this guy his day in court, getting this case in front of a jury, and everything's getting log jammed because of this pandemic. And on top of it, my client is still working. He's on the front lines during this pandemic. He's immunocompromised. It's like if there's anybody that's at high risk of dying in the early days of the pandemic, especially, it's Dr. Constantino. So I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do about this? I don't want to settle this case for cents on the dollar. I want to push this and get the guy his day in court and like really, hold the insurance company accountable for this. But if he's going to, die, then it's like, you got to take that into account. It's part of your job as a lawyer. You have to consider everything. And throughout this process leading up to the trial, which took several years, like we're dealing with this concern about the pandemic. He develops this huge infection in his leg. He had to get his leg amputated. Like, I'll never forget that phone call. Like, I remember it like it was yesterday. He calls me up on the phone. He's like, Matthew, I've got terrible news, but they have to amputate my leg. And I'm like, holy shit. And he just kept pushing on. It's like, we talked about this. We're like, do we want to settle the case? And he's like, let's just keep pushing. And then gets his leg amputated, survives. And then he gets kidney failure because his kidneys are overworking, trying to, fight all these infections that he's repeatedly getting. So he goes into kidney failure. He needs a kidney transplant. I don't know if you know how hard it is to get like a kidney donor, but
I've never tried them personally, but I imagine,
yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah,
it's like hard to find a kidney out there, actually.
Yeah.
And so it's like, shit, is he going to die because he can't find a kidney donor? And then finally gets one at the last second. It's like, getting a kidney transplant's no joke. It's like serious surgery.
Yeah.
Gets the kidney transplant, survives that too. And it's like, man, this guy is just a beast. Just an absolute beast. It's like he takes everything that the universe could be throwing at him and just beats it back. And we finally get our trial. And oh my God, it was like, we get to court. We're in Boston. We sued the insurance company in their hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Constantino has to come all the way from New York.
Mm-hmm.
In his condition, that's like a big ordeal.
Mm.
You know, he's got like his son flying out to drive them from New York all the way to Boston. You know, he's staying in a hotel. He's traveling with all this assistive equipment and stuff like that to, you know, live in this hotel. It's like, people don't realize, but, you know, getting out of your home in that kind of a condition when you're that disabled is not easy. It's like you got to use a shower that's not very accommodating for people
Mm-hmm.
with one leg and a paralyzed foot on the other leg. You know, toilet, grab bar, wheelchair, like all this stuff. It's all packed in the jalopy and, you know, in Boston. And we're like ready to do this trial. And then our judge gets COVID.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my God. And so the judge has COVID. He's delaying everything.
Uh-huh.
You know, we're scheduled to begin trial the following week. And Constantino was like, I can't stay here until next week because I have to go in for another surgery in New York to get another toe amputated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? It's like you're juggling all this stuff. You're juggling like 5 knives at the same time and trying to make sure it doesn't, you know, cut your wrists or your hand off or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked for this like emergency hearing with the judge to explain the situation to him. And I was like, look, I know that you've got COVID. We're scheduled to begin the first day of trial before he has to go back to New York and get his surgery. Like, please help me get Dr. Constantino on the stand so that he can actually testify in this case. And then he's back in New York and we can do the rest of the trial, you know, with him remote.
Mm.
And the defense, of course, is going crazy about this. And they're like, no, he's not allowed to testify. He's not allowed to testify. It's like,
Sound like good guys.
yeah. I mean, you know, these are really upstanding, good people that we're dealing with from the insurance industry.
Yeah. Okay.
But so the judge allows it. And he's like, look, we will do most of his testimony remotely. Courts never do that at trial.
Was this in federal or state court?
This is in state court.
Okay.
Yeah. But they're like, we never do these remote testimonies, even in the most extreme circumstances, but he was willing to make an exception. He said, but while he's here, I will allow you 2 minutes to present Dr. Constantino in front of the court, in front of the jury, and in front of me. 2 minutes. This is before opening statements even. You know, we've just impaneled our jury. And so he's like, you get a 2-minute demonstration. He's like, Mr. Bourhis, you're not going to talk. You don't get to comment on any of this. You don't get to ask any questions. This is literally just a demonstration, which I will facilitate, to show the jury Dr. Constantino's ability to stand and walk because it was a material issue in the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And that's all you needed.
That's all I needed. And so it was like this dramatic courtroom scene out of a movie. And my paralegal rolls Dr. Constantino in through the door, parks him right in front of the jury box.
Uh-huh.
And there's no talking. Nobody's saying a thing. They're just watching. And Constantino has his walking stick in one hand, and he grabs my paralegal's shoulder in the other, and he like tries like hoisting himself up out of his wheelchair and like falls back in the chair, and then tries again and like forces himself up. Mm-hmm. And he's like standing there like shaking and like holding Anne-Marie's shoulder with one hand and his walking stick with the other. He walks in this small 10-foot circle and gets back down in his wheelchair, and then he's out of the courtroom. And I'm just sitting there watching the people on the jury as this horror show unfolds right in front of them, and they had tears in their eyes. And I was like, this case is fucking over. It's over before it even started. And now this insurance company is going to have to get up and face this jury and face this judge and explain why they denied this guy's disability claim for like the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me so angry at them. I was like, this guy is engaged in the fight of his life. his family is engaged in the fight of their lives, watching him struggle to just go through one thing after the next and hope to stay alive.
And this is a doctor who spent his entire life helping people.
Exactly. The most giving, kind, charitable person you've ever met.
Uh-huh.
And then he finally needs support from the insurance company, and they're just doing everything they can to screw him over.
Wow.
I was like, how dare they do this to him? And in that moment, I was just so angry. You could probably see like the vein in my forehead like popping out. It probably was kind of unsightly, to be honest, but
You were like, sack of blood.
yeah, I was like, I'm just going to slaughter these people.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we did. And we got a unanimous jury verdict. And then we had a bench trial, and the judge came down on them like a ton of bricks. Chief judge of the Massachusetts Superior Court, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like the top guy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, awarded punitive damages against them, attorney fees. We got a bad faith verdict. It's like, that is not an easy task to do that. And yeah, just crucified them. It's awesome.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I mean, that's quite a story, I guess. I mean, congrats and thank you for helping Dr. Constantino. And I guess my key takeaway is number one, don't trust insurance companies.
Yeah, they're kidding.
And number two, get the lawyer involved quicker. Right?
Yeah, the delay screwed him over. If he had hired a lawyer sooner, it would have at least mitigated a lot of the risk that he faced.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. How long did the trial take?
Like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is Dr. Constantino okay? Like, is he
He's
moderately
great.
healthy?
Yeah, I mean, the guy is just a fighter. I visited him like a week ago in New York. He invited me to his house and had this big barbecue with his family. It was so nice. And yeah, he's doing great. It's amazing. I mean, really, it's like triumph of the human spirit.
Nice.
Such a fighter.
I love hearing stories like this. Because I'm in consumer protection law, right? And I deal a lot with banks. I deal with corporate entities, but not so much insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear these stories, and it befuddles me, right? Of how inhumane their conduct is. Because my clients, they're consumers, and they've been damaged mostly financially, right? But your clients are people that are actually hurt. The jury sees that this elderly doctor who had cancer and diabetes and one foot, right, and the other one with, I guess, 4 toes and is unable to walk, and this
like 3.5,
three and a half toes, yeah, and this insurance company can sit there and look you and Dr. Constantino in the eye and say, no, this thing he's been paying for the last 30 years, he doesn't need it. That's incredible.
Shocking.
Wow. It's hard to
corporate
believe.
greed. I mean, that's sort of the common theme.
Exactly,
between
corporate
what
greed.
I do and what you do is that like it's all driven by corporate greed.
Yeah, and I find in my practice a lot of times is not evilness, right? I think oftentimes us everyday people think of these corporations as evil, right? As this movie villain who's sitting there and just casting deviousness onto the world. What I find most often is actually it's apathy. They don't care, right? Dr. Constantino or one of my clients, they're just a little number. They're a claim number on a form,
Mm-hmm.
right? In an email that goes to somebody below middle management. And different departments handle different things. His claim, I'm guessing, was initially denied by the claims department, right? And then maybe got escalated to a higher level, and then they denied him again. And then the corporate hierarchy works in a way where you don't want to get in trouble. So the person that failed to see that provision in his insurance agreement is covering their own ass and doesn't want to be like, oh, well, I mean, they're trying to minimize and not pay out as much as possible, right? Because they don't see real human being. They just see a claim number.
Mm-hmm.
And their bonus depends on how much money they can save the company, right?
That's exactly right.
And then eventually when a lawyer comes in, it gets escalated to a different department, goes to the legal department, right? And the legal department starts requesting documents from the claims department. And the claims department is like, oh, we'll send you the documents this week. And at the end, real humans get lost in the shuffle and real people get hurt. And I mean, truly, apathy is evil in its own way. But thankfully, we have other professionals, within our industry like yourself that are able to help people and get them the justice they deserve, which unfortunately a lot of us don't even get the experience very often in our careers, right?
It's true. Yeah.
To actually reach that finality of a jury verdict. I have not been to a trial. So I clerked for a federal judge after law school, and I've not been to a trial since I worked for it. I've not been to a court for a trial since I worked in a court for a trial. So that's incredible, and I'm very congratulations on being able to help Dr. Constantino in this lawsuit.
What were the kind of trials that you saw when you were clerking?
Well, even when you're working, you don't see a lot of trials. We had a really bad personal injury trucking case that we saw. And we had a product liability case for RV. Mostly it's just hearings and motions. Trials get scheduled and then they get taken off calendar a week before they're supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's these things, they just never get to that point. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so few cases reach this final point of trial?
I think that a lot of it is that people have this aversion to the risk of trial.
What's the risk of trial?
Somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose.
That's true.
And everyone is so afraid of losing that they're not willing to try to win.
I love that. Yes, everybody's afraid of losing, so they're afraid to try to win.
Yeah. And I get it. That's why everybody settles. And this has been a trend for, at least 80 years, probably more than that. My dad even told me, back in the 90s and stuff, we'd sit around at the dinner table and talk about law. It's like both my parents are lawyers.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And, my dad was being a trial lawyer and representing real human beings against big corporations is a lawyer's highest calling. And, he would often sort of criticize the legal profession for moving in the direction of just settling cases. And this was a long time ago. And he was like, this has been the case ever since the 70s and the 80s. It's lawyers have been, not trying cases anymore. It's he was sad that the art of trial law was dying.
The art of advocacy.
Yeah. It's the kind of things that you would read about in To Kill a Mockingbird, this illustrious profession of being a lawyer in court and this democratic process of, having a jury decide these disputes. That's such a uniquely American thing. And it drew so many lawyers to the profession, including my dad and including me. And it's just not the way it is these days. Everyone settles. Nobody takes cases to trial, Well,
I'm glad that we have young attorneys like you who are willing to take on the risk and go for the win instead of living in fear of losing.
Yeah.
All right. So again, we have Matt Bourhis here from Golden Gate Legal and Bourhis Law Group, and it's been a pleasure. And until next time on the Avocado Toast.
Thanks for having me, Peng.
Thank you.